Wow. Yes, welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you heard I was talking about, working with a species that is difficult to see, and you guys are facing pretty much the same situation, dealing with animal that we can hardly see. And my first question to you is, how do you even study something that you can't see? Maybe I will start with Pablo.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
not yet. 1 second. Yes, now you can, right? I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you. Thank you for the invitation for this amazing panel. And yeah, one of the fantastic things that we have about penguins is that they come on land to breathe. So we see them on land. But then they spend over 70% of their lives in the ocean, where we don't see them. So the only way to know where they are is to use satellite technology or GPS technology. So we put tracking devices on the back of them. Sometimes the penguins, they swim only in one winter migration 8,000 miles, or more in some cases. So that's the only way we can see, and then we use that information to justify the creation of marine protected areas and to negotiate things with some sectors like oil sectors, oil developments, or fisheries, or other things, And now we're putting underwater critter cameras.
Oh, wow.
So we're not only tracking them, we see what they're doing there.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.
Hey, how about you, Rachel? How do you study?
Well, I'm also very pleased to be here. And all of you have obligate air breathers. My fish don't need to breathe, come to the surface and breathe air. So that's a bit of a difference. So how do we actually track animals that don't need to necessarily come to the surface? And especially if they're in turbid waters like Lake Osa, or I know in some of the cases like the dugongs and more. So we need to know if they're there or not. We use a relatively new technique called environmental DNA. So we filter water, we basically filter it through on a filter, and we're able to then compare all the filtrate on that filter to the species that might be in the water. And that is also how we rediscovered the presence of the critically endangered sawfish in multiple countries in Central America. And so eDNA is one, satellite tracking is another, where we actually track for thousands of kilometers across ocean basins, like a tiger shark that we tracked from Cape Verde to Brazil. I guess it liked the caipirinhas there, and then it decided to go back to Cabo Verde, probably to pup. Yeah. So we use some of those types of techniques as well.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. How about you, Sandra?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So for marine mammals, compared to Rachel sharks, it's much easier to study. But like what Rachel said, in Malaysia, our waters are very murky. So traditionally, we use boat-based survey to just go out on the sea and then observe them and record their behaviors. But due to the very murky water conditions, it makes observations pretty hard. So now we are complementing with new technologies like drone usage so that we get a bird eye view on their behaviors. And also we have been using BRAF, which is baited remoted underwater systems, and also acoustic to complement all those, so that combining all these technologies traditionally and all these technologies, we can piece their life together and learn about them more comprehensively. Yeah.
Wow, this is amazing. So it means that we all, monitoring the movement of our species. And there is a threat called climate change, which is probably affecting how those species the species are moving in the ocean. What's surprising have you observed, either in their movement or the behavior of the species that you monitor? Maybe we could start with you, Rachel.
So I think some of the things, climate change is definitely an incredibly huge threat to us, and the rising temperatures are not just the only threat to ecosystems like coral reefs that are so important to a lot of sharks, rays, turtles that we study, and where we're losing coral reefs, unfortunately, very quickly because they exist in a very small band of temperature, 27 to 29 degrees centigrade. But we have a double whammy with increased carbon dioxide that's being absorbed by the oceans, we have ocean acidification. And what that means is that that's actually pulling the rug out from under the whole food chain for all of our species, in fact. And as a result, you're seeing shifts in distribution, movement patterns of some of these big animals desperately trying to find new sources of food. So where you might have had predictable aggregations of species, they're no longer predictable. And they're showing up in other areas and other times of the year. And so that has a very direct impact also on the communities that are so readily dependent on them, especially fishing communities worldwide.
Wow, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Pablo?
So yes, in our case, we see, because we think that climate change is only affecting the temperature, right? But it changes everything, the dynamics of the winds, and we see that changes the circulation of the ocean, the places that are more productive. So we see changes in the distribution of the breeding distribution. Like, I mean, colonies that used to have, or species that used to have a limit, now they are going much further, and they are exposed to new threats. And of course, they are coexisting with communities that never seen these animals before. They don't know how to behave. We have some stories about that, in which they were putting penguins that belong to temperate species in the fridge because they thought, people think that penguins are from Antarctica, you know, and we even have a tropical penguin, but we have to educate the communities and also educate decision makers and, you know, foster new legislation so we can protect those penguins there. But one thing is, in the ocean, climate change is moving the food away from the colonies when the chicks are small, and the adults have to go get the food and come quickly. So it takes longer to bring food, and they end up feeding the chicks' legs, and some colonies are declining. But then penguins get on land. Climate change is increasing the heat waves, and sometimes we reach lethal temperatures. We had once 112 degrees in one of the colonies in Patagonia, and we have healthy penguins dying on the way to reach the coast, you know? And then heat waves, they trigger wildfires. And this is the most shocking thing we've ever seen. For some reason, penguins don't perceive the fire as a threat, so they don't escape. They've never been exposed to fire in 60 million years on the planet. So they just stay there until they die. And this is something we're very concerned, and we are working very hard to include the contingency plans into the management plans.
Thank you, Pablo. Sandra?
Yeah, I have to be honest, it's very hard to tell the climate change impacts on the species we are studying in Malaysia. It's not as visible as, like, you know, penguins in the Antarctic, where they suffer from habitat loss. But like what Rachel said, there is ripple effects of like climate change across the ecosystems and down the food chain, which might indirectly affect the dolphin distributions. Unless we can back it up with science, it's very hard to tell. But that said, a lot of our local fishers do report there are less fish catched in the area. But that could be also a consequences of overfishing in the earlier years, or it could be climate change. So at this point, it's really hard to tell it apart.
Yeah. But when you talk about climate change to your community, you know, how do you, because some people will argue that no, climate change is just, you know, something fake, it's not real, or, you know, it's just for the, you know, it's just people are just talking about it in the media. How do you demonstrate to the local community that, you know, climate change is real and is impacting wildlife and even their livelihood?
Yeah, it's very easy. Like, we just have to ask the local community, like, how are they feeling on a daily basis. Like, temperature in Malaysia has gone up through the roof. You can see almost every household is getting air conditioner. And also, like, flooding has been more intense. It's associated with sea level rise. So when you try to relate to all these situations that they are experiencing on like a regular basis, it's easier to convince them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Richard, is it the same for you?
So one of the things that we do a lot is we do fisher surveys or community surveys, and we talk to patriarch fishers, and older community members to try and gauge what the change has been over decades, over their lifetime. And that's how we can understand the shifts and the changes, because a lot of our folks in communities, I like to say, have PhDs of the sea, right, of the coast. And so they bring some very specific information on species changes, on the shifts in fisheries, on the erosion of coastlines, on the loss of mangroves and corals, and so much more. So the communities not only have this information, and with them, it's really being able to tap in, ask those questions, that we're able to co-create solutions. And there are solutions to this climate change crisis.
Yeah. And talking about solution, what are the, how can the community help to fight against climate change?
Is this for me?
Yes, you
Oh.
can. Yes.
I think one of the biggest things really is, the diversification of income streams and really enabling more access to education, enabling new or co-identifying with communities, especially fishermen. We work with small-scale fishers, is looking at what other income streams there are, because we know that fisheries are declining. Everywhere we look, fisheries are declining. So what other income streams can they rely on? And I don't like to say only tourism. Tourism is a good one, but we've seen in the pandemic and with other things that tourism can take really big hits. So diversification into things like construction and other skills that are going to be needed, even HVAC and more, that are going to be needed with the growing populations that we're seeing worldwide. And more than anything, how we can support their children as well to be able to go into new professional avenues. One thing I just wanted to mention is, in all of the fishers I've surveyed around the world across many years, I've always asked them, and what is it that you hope that your children will do? And there wasn't a single one who has ever told me, I want my child to be a fisher. So we know that they recognize fishing is probably going to be harder and harder, and they want more for the next generation. So where we can help, we all have the privilege of being able to provide some of those kinds of support, is with that education and helping those next generation diversify.
Thank you, Rasha. Pablo? Yes, go ahead, please. Amazing.
So when we talk about climate change with the people, we try to share stories that resonate with them, And 20 years ago, researchers, we were treated as crazy people, trying to be extremists and whatever, many other things. And now people know. You just know. You don't need to convince anybody else. I mean, you go to your garden and your grandmother knows, oh, the bird that used to come this month, now is coming 1 month earlier or later. They know. They just know. That's why it's so important to go and talk and listen to the communities. They know much more than what we know. And we get a lot of information. But linking these effects of climate change with something that impacts them is really important. I was here in Climate Week in New York, that there are, I think there was like 23 states in the United States that didn't have any journalist reporting about weather here in the States. So it is very important to connect to those links, so to educate those people about why it's happening, And then one of the things in terms of research, but how can we deal with that, So we recognize that climate change cannot be solved in the short term. So our main challenge, and I think for all conservationists, is to at least reduce the impact of human activities in the short term. So we give our species the chance to be more resilient and cope better with the things that humans are doing, because we know we cannot deal with climate change immediately, but we give our species a break, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow, thank you. Yeah, let's talk about a different subject now. We have many challenges. We have poaching, climate change, and a large surface area to cover. The ocean is huge. And how we've limited resources, because the resources are not always enough to cover all those needs. So how do you choose your priority, given the limited resources?
I think with limited resources, like you said, prioritization is key. So we have to understand, like, part of the thinking is about where do we want to put the efforts. So for example, right, marine mammals like dugongs, whales and dolphins, it's easier to get support rather than, say, seagrass meadow. If I ask you to protect seagrass, it's not as charismatic as marine mammals. So in that case, I know it's important to protect all species and ecosystem, but sometimes it's quite challenging. But by protecting marine mammals, you actually have a spillover benefits for other taxa and the other ecosystem. Yeah. Also, we also have to look about the urgency and also the feasibility. What is our biggest threat, and what can we do realistically to achieve all these measures? So like, for example, in Marisette, now we know that globally, marine mammals, the biggest threat is bycatch. So in Malaysia, we start initiating this conservation program, which we call bycatch mitigation initiatives, where we use acoustic pingers to emit high-frequency sounds that could alert dolphins about net occurrences. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. What about you, Rachel?
So one of the things that I really love is having these long conversations in communities with fishers, with youth, what's important to you. And a lot of us eat fish. A lot of these coastal communities rely on fish, and yet they see the decline in some of these species, and they're concerned about that. So it's taking that concern and saying, shall we try to figure out together a solution? And so to give you an example of fish would be the snappers and the groupers. You know, these are some of the animals, and I call them animals, the wildlife, that take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years to reach maturity. So we have to think about them in very different ways than a lot of people have been thinking about them so far, that there are millions of them in the sea, etc. And so it's those conversations that have been very, very helpful to then focus, okay, which species do we look at first? And which species, and then the dovetailing that with which species might also be considered threatened globally. They might be on the International Union for the Conservation of Nature lists. The ones that are charismatic, that really helps. We know you love charismatic species, thank you. So we're trying to find this kind of, it's the ikigai. If you know what an ikigai is, it's that perfect center that integrates what communities need, what is known to be endangered, what we can get funded, and more to find those species that will be representative of ecosystems like seagrasses, coral reefs, or mangroves, or more. And that's a lot of how we focus things. And we know, for example, in the case of sharks, people generally fear sharks. So we need to change those attitudes towards sharks, and tourism has been a huge help. It's generating over $790 million in tourism benefits to a lot of community stakeholders around the world now. So that is a very nice alternative and a big motivator to try and protect species of sharks where they are aggregating or feeding or reproducing and more, and integrating the people who are reliant on them on their continuation, on their stewardship.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard.
So, of course, there are a lot of needs for wildlife and our species that are urgent and immense, but resources are limited. So at some point, we have to make a decision. So we try to be pragmatic, but at the same time strategic, So we recognize which species are in more need, but we also assess what Sandra was saying, the feasibility. What's possible? Are we going to waste this money for nothing? So we also see in what action can we be more impactful and be more effective. We had the opportunity of creating the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the penguin specialist groups. This is the organization that creates the red list for all the species. So they have a lot of criteria to define if it's a critical endanger, whatever, vulnerable, and then you see all the things that you have to pay attention to, But it depends on each case, And one of the things that we face with the penguins that are charismatic, thank you, is that people think that they're all happy and fun and they're, happy feet all the way, because of the movies of Hollywood, and cartoons and things that are all, and the things, there are 19 species now, and half of them are threatened. They're not having fun. There's no, happy feet anymore. That's the reality,
Yeah.
But at least people think penguins are cuddly.
Yeah,
I have a PR problem.
you have to invest there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Pablo, tell us how, like you doing all this amazing conservation work, different activity, education, advocacy, but how does success looks like for you? When do you know that, oh, here I'm winning, I'm succeeding, I'm saving this animal, especially that, there are many, and they live in an area we don't see them very often. The habitat, how do you know that the habitat is really improving? All this. So, what is success for you?
Thank you. So I think my vision is to create a lasting impact, to create things that will be in the planet when I leave the planet, I was thinking about Jane, all the things she left behind, So some of the things are just a product. Or you create a protected area or you don't. It's no gray areas. And sometimes you work years to make that happen, but you are successful or not. But some of the things are the process. It's not just a product. So working with communities in participatory processes to create a management plan or some education with the community is about the process and reaching this, because in the long run, I think we all try to foster a conservation culture, and to include those values into the culture of all the people on the planet, When I was young, nobody was talking to me at school about the environment. Now all the kids know that.
Yeah.
So we won there. We're winning there in terms of communication of conservation. And I love creating protected areas. We invest so much in that because they are there. They will be there forever. Nobody will delete them. And that is something we're going to leave behind us for this planet.
Awesome. But once, in my country, we also create a lot of protected areas. But sometimes those protected areas, there is not like a true management. Like it's just like a map with, they've drawn, okay, this is protected area. Sometimes with no concrete action. Is that the same issue that you're facing in?
Yes, the things that we work and we invest a lot, not only in designing the management plan for that, but also in implementing. And one of the things we have in our countries, and I guess we share, most penguins live in developing countries. And Argentina, where I live, I think is the most unstable, economically, socially, and in all the dimensions you can imagine. So how can we how can we make sure we have stability, at least in the creation? So we work with the communities. Okay. Those are the permanent stakeholders. They're not appointed politically. And we also work with the staff that is permanent in the government, the ones that do not change because they're not appointed politically. So they invest a lot of time dealing with these protected areas. And then it doesn't matter who is the president. They want things to happen, and the communities as well. So that gave us more stability in the long run for the protected areas. And of course, we have lawyers.
Awesome. I like that.
And good ones.
Yes. Awesome.
They're expensive, but yeah.
Richard, do you have lawyers too?
Actually, we do have lawyers. Yes, we do as well.
And did they make success happen to you? How does that success look like?
We love lawyers. They're very helpful. But our success, I would say that to me, success is seeing mindset changes. And I've seen over the last almost 30 years that I've been working in the sector, a real change in attitudes towards sharks and towards fishing very vulnerable or endangered species per the IUCN criteria, and increased stewardship. To me, success looks like a WhatsApp that I receive at 10 o'clock at night from a fisher who shows me proudly that he caught a sawfish, one of the very, very few that have ever been caught in the Americas. He shows me he's tagged it, he shows me he's measured it, and he's released it. And he's proud.
Amazing. That's wonderful.
That's a measure, for me, that's a huge measure of success. And when that gets repeated and it spreads horizontally like wildfire, sorry, not for the penguins, then you create a movement and you create pride, and it just grows and grows and grows. And this is what we are seeing in multiple countries with sharks in Belize, in certain areas where we've been working 10 years. We've seen a 10-fold increase in sharks.
Wow.
Wow.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Awesome.
So keep at it. This is not a short race. This is a marathon. And many of the things that we are doing, we are not necessarily going to see in our lifetime.
No.
We are setting everything up for the many years to come. And we're,
Yeah.
that's our lot, really.
That's awesome. Thank you. Wow.
Wow.
So we're running short of time, but I'm giving 1 minute to Sandra to tell us how success looks.
Okay. So in Marisat, we have a running joke. Success is when one day we are all out of job, where the world no longer needs conservationists. Yeah, where dolphins or like penguins, sharks, they can live, survive, and thrive on their own in an ideal world. Yeah, that's success to us. Like that's
Wow.
a joke.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you very much, guys.